On this Friday night, the consequences for Canada of Trump's America First philosophy.
Which means no friends, no allies.
The potential trade war and the fears Canada's economy could crumble. An alleged plot to assassinate Trump foiled. The links to Iran and the death of a powerful general. The beautiful game and an ugly attack. The anti-Semitic assault against Israeli soccer fans. And one aunt's heartfelt tribute.
This is something I need to do for her.
The new book honoring the only Canadian journalist to die in the war in Afghanistan.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Carolyn Jarvis.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Police in Amsterdam say dozens have been arrested after what authorities called a night of hateful anti-Semitic violence against Israeli soccer fans. Dutch leaders have condemned the attacks, calling them completely unacceptable, though it remains unclear how they were sparked. Redmond Shannon reports on the clashes that have garnered international reaction.
Dutch police called them hit-and-run style attacks that targeted Israeli soccer fans supporting their team Maccabi Tel Aviv. The violence erupted after their game against Amsterdam team Ajax. 5 people were hospitalized. Police made more than 60 arrests.
They throw people into the water, the freezing water, and they drove on people, they stabbed people. It was like 1940, the 1940s.
There were no incidents at or near the stadium where a pro-Palestine protest had been banned. Earlier in the day, Israeli fans gathered in central Amsterdam. Some chanting anti-Arab slogans on the way to the game. Police said the night before some Maccabi fans tore down a Palestinian flag and destroyed a taxi. Authorities say some taxi drivers were involved in Thursday's attacks, but the mayor would not comment on their ethnicity.
I'm ashamed that this happened in the Netherlands, and it's a terrible anti-Semitic attack, and we will not tolerate, and we will prosecute the perpetrators.
Maccabi Tel Aviv is owned by Canadian billionaire Mitch Goldhar. Jewish groups worldwide say the footage is deeply troubling.
What comes to my mind is my late father was a Holocaust survivor from the Warsaw Ghetto. And the idea of people beating Jews in the street is an anathema. It's horrendous. It's a horror to anyone, Jew or otherwise, of good civil conscience.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu likened the violence to Kristallnacht, when Jews were targeted across Nazi Germany 86 years ago. An era that forced Jews like Anne Frank to try and evade the Nazis. Her hiding place in Amsterdam remains one of the city's most visited destinations. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
The FBI says it has foiled another plot to assassinate Donald Trump. The details were unsealed in an indictment today. Iran's Revolutionary Guard is accused of coordinating the plot as part of ongoing attempts to target U.S. government officials and Iranian dissidents in America. Our Washington Bureau Chief, Jackson Proskow, joins us now with the details. Jackson.
Carolyn, 3 people have been charged in the foiled plot, including 2 U.S. citizens. The Justice Department says the scheme was orchestrated by members of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard. They say one of the suspects was tasked with surveilling and ultimately killing Trump. In the unsealed indictment, prosecutors say the suspect indicated that the assassination plot would cost a huge amount of money. In response, an IRGC official said, "We have already spent a lot of money, so money's not an issue," suggesting a continuing plot to target Trump. The Justice Department says the plan was to be put on hold if it could not be carried out before the election because the Iranians believed Trump would lose and it would actually be easier to carry out after the campaign. All of it ties back to the 2020 assassination of Iranian General Qassem Soleimani by the Trump administration, for which Iran has pledged revenge. Over the summer, a Pakistani man with alleged ties to Iran was also arrested in another assassination plot targeting Trump. And other Trump administration officials like John Bolton and Mike Pompeo have previously been targeted too. In this most recent case, Iranian-American journalist Masih Alinejad is also believed to be a target. The suspect most directly linked to the plot is currently believed to be in Iran. This will no doubt factor into the president-elect's views towards Tehran. He has already appointed a man with hawkish perspectives to oversee hiring at the State Department. Carolyn?
Jackson Proskow in Washington, thank you. With Donald Trump set to retake the White House, Canada's economy could be in for a bumpy ride. Trump has threatened to up the ante with aggressive tariffs and renegotiating the Canada-US-Mexico trade agreement. As Mackenzie Gray reports, a possible trade war could spell trouble on both sides of the border.
Thank you very much.
It's one of Donald Trump's favorites.
To me, the most beautiful word in the dictionary is tariff.
And you'll be hearing a lot more of it with the incoming president promising to implement a minimum 10% tariff on anything imported into the States. But how would that work? American companies importing goods from Canada, as an example, would have to pay the U.S. government a tax of at least 10% of the value of what they bring in, driving prices up for U.S. consumers, and in Trump's view, making American businesses more competitive.
We're going to bring thousands and thousands of businesses and trillions of dollars in wealth back to the good old USA.
Trump also wants to rip up a deal he previously signed, saying he'll renegotiate the new NAFTA, which on top of tariffs could crush the Canadian economy. The Liberals say they have a plan, but won't share any details.
Tariffs or thickening of the border between Canada and the U.S. will inevitably hurt American workers, American jobs as well.
U.S. workers could also get hit if Ottawa applies reciprocal tariffs, like they did in 2018, when Trump slapped them on Canadian steel.
We did respond with dollar-for-dollar retaliatory tariffs because we knew it was important to defend the national interest.
Eventually, both sides dropped the tariffs, but this time, don't expect the same treatment from Canada's largest trading partner.
We understand that the agenda is America first, which means no friends, no allies.
Friends is not how you describe Trudeau and Trump.
Let's face it, the two leaders don't have a great relationship. And I think that could have an impact.
Former Conservative leader Rona Ambrose helped the Liberals during the last NAFTA negotiations and believes the Canadian economy is not prepared or resilient enough to handle Trump tariffs.
We need to retaliate hard, fast, and in areas of the economy in the U.S. where it hurts him politically.
Some potential good news. Chrystia Freeland's believed to have a solid rapport with Robert Lighthizer, Trump's former trade representative and the top U.S. NAFTA negotiator, who the Financial Times is reporting tonight, Carolyn, has been asked to take on the job again.
Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa, thank you. Trump has named his campaign manager, Susie Wiles, as the new White House Chief of Staff. She's the first woman to hold the post.
The Ice Maiden. We call her the Ice Maiden.
The 67-year-old from Florida is considered one of the most respected, long-time Republican strategists. Her role is a key part of the administration. It traditionally involves gatekeeping and driving the president's agenda. Wiles previously ran successful campaigns for Rick Scott and Ron DeSantis during their respective bids to become Florida's governor. She was also Trump's campaign director in Florida during his 2016 presidential run. Canada's unemployment rate held firm at 6.5% in October. Statistics Canada says the country gained about 15,000 jobs last month, many of them full-time. Our senior business correspondent, Anne Gaviola, joins us now. Anne, what's behind these numbers?
Let me break down what's happening. Layoffs are muted, and we have high immigration that's increased the number of people looking for jobs and not being able to find employment. So even though, as you mentioned, nearly 15,000 jobs were added, the national jobless rate stayed steady at 6.5%, which is a nearly 3-year high. The big question I get asked, is this enough to change anything in terms of the Bank of Canada's final interest rate announcement of the year on December 11th? And the consensus seems to be, no, this is pretty status quo. Economists still think we're in for a quarter or a half-point cut from the central bank. Two more interesting bits in here. 6 in 10 employed people say they're happy in their roles. That's according to Statistics Canada. And hourly wages increased for the second straight month, and that's an increase of about 5%. Those are the things that caught my eye. Carolyn?
All right, thanks for that. Anne Gaviola in Toronto tonight. Canada Soccer says an independent review has confirmed that the Paris Olympics drone spying scandal was not an isolated incident. Women's head coach Bev Priestman and 3 other Soccer Canada officials were suspended at the Olympic Games after a staff member was caught using a drone to spy on a New Zealand practice. Canada Soccer called the incident a symptom of a past pattern of unacceptable culture and insufficient oversight within the national teams. It's promised to release key conclusions from the review within a week. An elementary school in Nova Scotia is doing damage control after it requested veterans not to wear their uniforms to a Remembrance Day ceremony today. The move sparked a flurry of reaction and outrage. Now, as Global's Sky Bridenblom reports, the school is apologizing.
The Remembrance Day service at Sackville Heights Elementary School could have looked very different this year. In a November newsletter, the school asked Armed Forces members not to wear their uniforms out of concern for students from countries experiencing conflict, a decision that has left many shocked.
I think it's okay to be patriotic, especially for people who were willing to put their life on the line for you.
In a social media post on Thursday night, PC party leader Tim Houston, who is currently running for re-election, accused the school leaders of demeaning the people who protect the country. The school soon backtracked on its decision and issued an apology, welcoming military members to attend in the attire that makes them the most comfortable. In a statement, the HRCE says it and the school have the utmost respect for those who have served and are serving. The HRCE says any students who are impacted by seeing people in uniform can reach out to the school and they will be supported. Despite the apology, Houston, whose father served in the military, remains firm in his stance.
I would never ask our veterans to not wear their uniforms or to hide who they are. Saying, lest we forget, is a solemn promise to the fallen.
The federal minister of Veterans Affairs welcomes the school's move to reverse the decision.
And I think it's important to make sure that we thank the men and women that wear their uniform proudly. They wear the Canadian flag on their shoulder. And again, this is the time of year to reflect and to thank them for their service and their contribution to our country.
Stewart, whose daughter attended the school last year, says it's important for children to know the legacy of those who fought for our freedoms.
I think it pays respect. I know we always do our moment of silence on Remembrance Day, and I think that it's maybe disrespectful to say that they can't wear their uniform.
Sky Bridenblom, Global News, Middle Sackville, Nova Scotia.
Quebec police have arrested 17 men in a major crackdown on child sexual exploitation. More than 200 officers and staff conducted raids in several cities, including Montreal, targeting an alleged online child pornography ring. Computer equipment was seized from 20 locations. The men arrested range in age from 38 to 80 years old and face charges related to possession, distribution, and accessing child pornography. And officers in Alberta have busted an alleged fentanyl super lab near Valley View, about 3.5 hours northwest of Edmonton. About $700,000 worth of drugs were seized. Highly specialized lab equipment was also removed and destroyed. It's believed the lab was a significant source of bulk fentanyl in Western Canada for 2 years. A 55-year-old BC man has been charged. The search is on in South Carolina for a bunch of monkeys on the loose. Find out why coming up. Plus, Spain can't catch a break. The second flooding disaster in 2 weeks. Parts of northeastern Spain are reeling from flash flooding. Torrential rain washed through streets early this morning. Dozens of cars were swept away, but no deaths were reported. This happened just 1 week after the Valencia region was rocked by one of the worst floods in Spain's history. That disaster killed at least 200 people. California has declared a state of emergency in Ventura County as firefighters struggle to contain a brush fire that has exploded to more than 8,000 hectares in the past 24 hours. The mountain fire northwest of Los Angeles has forced at least 14,000 people to flee and is less than 10% contained. Nearly 90 structures have been damaged and more than 130 destroyed. The governor says statewide resources have been called in to help in the fight. And at least 4 wildfires are burning on the other side of the U.S. in New Jersey. Fire crews say bone-dry conditions and wind are fueling the flames, which are threatening several homes. The state has not received measurable precipitation in over a month, setting a new record for the fall. 43 monkeys are still on the loose after escaping from a medical research facility in South Carolina earlier this week. The primates ran out after a new employee left a gate open. Police are urging people to avoid the animals and keep their windows and doors shut.
We want to ensure that the community is aware that there is no public health risk associated with these animals. Despite the work they do there, these animals are not infected with anything. They're healthy. They're skittish in nature.
The monkeys are described as very young females, similar to the ones in this video. They've been spotted in the woods close to the facility, but none have been caught. Shining a light on domestic homicide. Ahead, a Nova Scotia family calls out police for their response. In Nova Scotia, the daughters of a woman killed by her husband are speaking out about what happened to her in an effort to shed more light on intimate partner violence. The case is one of 3 domestic homicides confirmed in the province this week alone. As Heidi Petracek reports, there are calls for more awareness and transparency from police in reporting these crimes.
Tara Graham cherishes the quilts made by her mother, 59-year-old Brenda Tatlock-Burke, who loved crafting and had a beaming smile.
She was just really outgoing and wanted to love life.
Her life ended October 18th at her Enfield, Nova Scotia home in a case RCMP characterized as 2 adults found dead, a woman by homicide, a man of self-inflicted wounds. The 2 people were known to one another, said police, but wouldn't give further details.
My sister and I just felt like she needed to be brought to life in who she was and the means in which she was killed.
So she and her sister spoke out, criticizing the Nova Scotia RCMP not only for failing to disclose the deceased perpetrator was their stepfather, Brenda's husband, but for choosing not to reveal he was a retired RCMP officer.
I just think it's really important that we just don't say we can trust somebody because of a badge or a uniform that they wear.
Only after the case made headlines did the RCMP release those details. The head of the force in Nova Scotia acknowledging they need to do better.
Recognizing that, it might not be, that day or the next day that we can actually communicate that it's intimate partner violence. But we do want that message to get out there.
The Mounties have since confirmed 2 other cases of intimate partner homicide in the province just this past week. Statistics show rates of intimate partner violence in Canada increased 13% over the past 5 years.
Every day and a half, a woman is murdered, a girl is murdered in Canada because of misogyny and hatred and patriarchy. And we really have to start paying attention to it and stop it because it's a preventable crime.
It can happen to anybody and people are not alone.
Graham says her mother was planning to leave their stepfather, but assured her daughters she would be okay, never imagining they'd be left without her. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
Emotional memoir. Next, a heartfelt tribute to a young Canadian journalist killed in Afghanistan. The contributions of Indigenous peoples to Canada's military were recognized today. Indigenous Veterans Day honors First Nations, Inuit, and Métis service members who fought for Canada. Many Indigenous veterans had to overcome numerous obstacles to serve our country, yet for decades were not recognized for their contributions. And it's not only soldiers we honor on Remembrance Day. Journalists who risk their lives to tell the world about the horrors of war sometimes never return. 2024 has been one of the deadliest years for journalists. It also marks 15 years since Michelle Lang, a young reporter from Calgary, was killed. Now her life and legacy are being remembered in a new book. Heather Yorks-West reports.
She was not a soldier, but for the last 14 years, Michelle Lang has been honored alongside members of Canada's fallen military in remembrance.
Lang was on a 6-week assignment to Afghanistan for the Calgary Herald.
In 2009, Lang and 4 Canadian soldiers died after the armored vehicle they were riding in was struck by a roadside bomb. The first and only Canadian journalist to die in the 2-decade-long war.
I really wanted to honor her
and create a legacy.
It's why, soon after the death of her niece, Catherine Lang began working on a book, examining Michelle's life and the role journalists play in times of war.
I've learned a number of things, not the least of which is how important that first record of history is that journalists provide. And I think that is the sacrifice that journalists like Michelle are willing to die for. It's a very somber day.
Written across the almost 15 years since her niece's death, the book chronicles changes to Canada's media landscape as well. With fewer journalists working for the Calgary Herald, Michelle's once busy and vibrant newsroom no longer exists in a physical form.
And at the entrance to the newsroom, they had created this absolutely beautiful space in Michelle's memory. And now that space it's been dismantled and it's in storage.
As that tribute waits for a new public and permanent home, Lang hopes her book will bring Michelle's story to a new generation, a record of a record keeper who paid the ultimate price. Heather Yurex West, Global News, Calgary.
And Donna Friesen will anchor live coverage of this year's National Remembrance Day ceremony in Ottawa, Monday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, 7:30 Pacific here on Global Television, at globalnews.ca, and all of our streaming platforms. And that is Global National for this Friday night. I'm Carolyn Jarvis. Tonight's Your Canada is the Veterans Memorial at Riverside Memorial Park in Regina. We love seeing Your Canada. Please email your photos to globalnational@globalnews.ca. Thanks for watching. Hope you can join us again tomorrow. Have a great night.